Hello and welcome to Wisdom Bites. Hope you're well. Thank you once again for joining. It's very much appreciated. And in today's pack program, I'm going to be looking at, as per the title of this video, the 100% accurate chart, which is predicting in the next 2 months 140,000 Bitcoin. So we're going to have a look at what happened in the previous 3 cycles within 2 months after leaving the previous all-time high, and why that's predicting that we should get to 140,000 within 2 months from now. I'll also be having a look at the overall picture with Bitcoin to see exactly what's happening, and we're going to have a look at exactly what's happening in the background with the ETFs, with the wider markets, and the things that are in the news to show how Bitcoin fits into that narrative. So if that sounds interesting, then without further ado, you know exactly what to do. Get yourself a cup of tea, sit yourself down, eyes on the screen, and let's get cracking. But before I begin, the usual polite reminder, please remember everything in my videos is just for educational purposes. So please always do your wider research before you make any investment decisions or any swing trade decisions. So we'll dive straight into this and have a look at exactly what's happened when we went past the previous all-time high, and within 2 months what happened in terms of the price action, and that will give us some sort of a clue as to what is about to happen as we go past the 69,000 in the current price action with Bitcoin. So I'm going to start off with this first cycle here. So in this first cycle here, once we'd got past the previous all-time high with this candle, so we're on the monthly chart, and the next 2 months, these 2 green candles here, the next 2 months took the price up by 750%. That's 7.5x within 2 months. And eventually we topped out at a much higher price here. And in the next cycle, once we got past the all-time high at this point and went above it here, so the next 2 months from this all-time high with these 2 candles here was 151%, and we eventually topped out at this point at 20,000. So far 750% and 151%. And the third cycle, once we got above the all-time high of 20,000, at this point here, the next 2 months took us to this candle here, and that was 114%. So 750, 151 and 114%. So all 3 were above the 100% mark. And you're probably thinking, well, it's a diminishing returns going on now into the 4th cycle. But what we have is the little matter of the ETFs, which have caused the price to move into the all-time high before the halving for the first time in Bitcoin's history. And the Bitcoin charts always try to make you feel that it's going to do one thing when it does completely the opposite. So if you think that it's going to be now much less than the 100%, and you may well be right, but the chances are, based on the behavior of the chart so far, the contrarian view would be to be much higher here than the previous 3 cycles. But if we just go by what's happened in the charts, i.e. an average of around about 100% plus, we can see that with this candle last month when it closed was above the previous all-time high of 69,000. So if we took a measure from that 69,000, then that would obviously take us to the 140,000. Obviously it could be much more, it might be a little bit less, but this is what it's predicting. And people ask, why is that the case when it doesn't do that very, very quickly over here? And the answer lies, if you look left here, that there is price action with lots of obstacles to get through. And once you get past here, as you can see here, there is no price action to stop it from moving very, very quickly and rapidly to the upside. And this is why once every all-time high is broken, you see incredible rapid movements to the north side. So incredibly interesting. A lot of people not expecting something like 140,000 Bitcoin, but it looks with a high probability that based on the previous cycles, we should get at least 100% move in the next couple of months. And that's not my opinion, that's not my prediction, it's just what I've shown you in the charts of what's happened in the past. Okay, I'm going to move on to the ETFs because this is one of the biggest narratives that we've seen for the last 15 years with Bitcoin. And it is exactly what has been driving the price to its previous all-time high before the halving this time around for the first time in 15 years. So we need to know exactly what's happening that's going to be driving the price forward over the next 6 to 12 months when we expect the bull market to end. And as I mentioned many weeks ago, and I've been mentioning it a few times since then, that the Hong Kong regulator is fast tracking Bitcoin spot ETF approvals. And now we've got a firm date as to when this will happen. If we scroll down here, we can see here that according to local news outlet 10 Cent News, the first batch of the spot Bitcoin ETFs is set to be approved in the region by April the 15th. Now, if you think that Hong Kong is only a small player, please remember Hong Kong covers the whole of China in terms of the market. So what we can expect is a huge demand from the whole of China in terms of buying up Bitcoin. And this may well surpass the success of the ETFs in the USA. So incredibly important news, which many people have not factored in, but certainly a lot of demand coming up over the next couple of months, starting from the April 15th. And guess what happens after April the 15th? Within the next 7 or 8 days, we're going to get the halving. So this is timed incredibly well that after the halving, we could see an incredible amount of demand from around the world. And what this is doing is driving up the narrative by other people in this space who are predicting these amounts of figures. These are not my predictions. This is 250,000 Bitcoin by Tim Draper. And these are all going to be driven by the ETFs. And if you're wondering why the price of Bitcoin went down over the last week or so, this Bitcoin tracker gives you the answer here. So while we got the Genesis sell-off over here, that's got out of the way. Then we started to recover at this point, as I showed you in the last video. Over the last few days, we had this dumpage here, and this has caused the price for Bitcoin to go down. But as you've seen, over the last 24 hours, the price for Bitcoin has gone back above the 70,000. So as time is going on, the most of the dumpage is increasingly getting flushed out before the halving, and we can start seeing some big moves up, just like this candle here, over at this point over the next couple of months. And many people are wondering why the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which once held 619,000 Bitcoins at the launch of the ETFs, is now holding nearly half as much. And apart from the various court cases and the Genesis dumping, the main reason is this one here, the 1.5% fee. When you compare the other ETFs are at these levels here. So there's a natural movement from high-priced ETF fees to low-priced ETF fees. And this is right up to date for today. And just these two companies, BlackRock and Fidelity, are now holding more Bitcoin than the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And what we can do is to expect the Grayscale to be still bleeding over the next few months, but it has been more than made up by the various other ETFs here. And if we have a look at the asset inflows and outflows in the Bitcoin ETF overview here, we can see that over the last 7 days, there's been a lot of dumpage from the Grayscale Trust here. And it's been more than BlackRock has been buying up. But still, overall, it's been still in positive territory, as you can see here. So there you have it. That's the background of what's going on with the ETFs and what's going on in the news in terms of expectations. So we can see quite clearly that we can really expect over the next few months anyway, without any historical price resistances over here, we should make very rapid moves to the upside here over the next 2 to 3 months. Okay, moving on to the SPX, and what we've seen so far over the last few days, and at yesterday's close, we actually went down below this point here where we thought the new cycle had begun. So it looks like with a higher probability now that we're going to go a little bit further down to create a new 60-day cycle low here. So we expected to move into the 60-day cycle low. And last week we created this big Marubozu candle to the downside. But obviously there's a more deeper correction going on here. So we'll wait until this correction ends before we start moving into the midpoint of the next cycle at this point. And then we can establish the actual 60-day cycle low. So we'll just have to wait and see for that to develop. So whilst Bitcoin has been rising over the last 24 hours, the SPX has been actually making a lower low from last week here. And this may be the reason why the CPI data came in much hotter than people expected. The expectation was 3.4% and it came in at 3.5%. And that caused the dollar to rise substantially yesterday, as you can see here. So it's now broken the previous high and made a new higher high. And what we do have is this resistance point with these 2 points. And then we have also this resistance point here. So it looks with a higher probability that we may get the dollar to go a little bit higher into this range here at around about 105.5. And until that happens, it may well be that the SPX and the wider markets may well be bleeding down over the next few days. And similarly, it's affecting the Russell 2000, where it's now coming back to retest the previous resistance point one more time. Having actually tested it there, we're now coming back to retest it one more time. So the dollar's really having a negative effect on the markets, as you would expect. And since the CPI data, it's had an effect on the gold prices here as well. So we're just taking a little bit of a breather with this bull flag with the gold price on the daily chart. But we can see on the weekly chart, it's absolutely flying, really looking bullish, and we can expect further follow-up over the next few weeks and months. And as you can see on the monthly chart, it's looking incredibly bullish. So the current monthly candle is following through from the previous breakage of this neckline over here. So it looks like a full green light for the gold. And the same for silver. As I mentioned in last week's video, we should come back up here and find resistance based on the previous resistance over here. So it's exactly what we've done. We've come up to that line, and this wick is telling us that there is a lot of resistance at this point. But once silver gets above this resistance point, just like gold, we should see a big follow through very, very quickly and very rapidly. And moving on to Bitcoin, and we have this bull flag over here, which is a continuation pattern to the upside. So this is what we're expecting. This has to break up with a higher probability to the upside here. And as I mentioned in last week's video, that once it gets to about the 70%, around here, this is when we expect some sort of a breakage, and we got that on Monday with this candle. But unfortunately, it seems to be a bit of a fake out at the moment, but we are trying one more time here to get above this symmetrical triangle. And the confirmation of this now will be once we break above this point, and that is at 7,270. Once we break above that, then it's blue skies ahead again. And then we should start that 2-month period of rapid price movements for Bitcoin. And on the weekly chart, we can see quite clearly that Bitcoin, having gone above the 8 EMA, the exponential moving average on the weekly chart, since October, Bitcoin has been finding support time and time again on this 8 EMA. This is what we've got to keep our eye on. As long as we don't break below this 8 EMA, it looks like there's a trajectory to the upside. And once we break above the 74,000, you'll see that the price will start moving much, much higher than the 8 EMA. Then this is exactly what happened in the previous few cycles. If you look at the last cycle itself, once it got above the 8 EMA here, in October 2020, we continued to find support on this 8 EMA all the way to the 64,000 top here. And if you look at the Bollinger Bands on the weekly chart, we can see that once we get above the Bollinger Bands, we seem to have a period of consolidation for the next move to the upside. So this is exactly what's happening currently. We went above it over here, and now the price is coming well within the bands one more time for the next push to the upside. So everything looking really bullish for Bitcoin over the next few months. Okay, just a quick word about the strategy. Many people ask in the comments about the strategy to follow over here. And because people keep making the same mistakes because they lose patience with the markets, just like currently people are losing patience with the Bitcoin miners, and I'm getting a lot of comments about why this time around the Bitcoin miners are not going to perform. We've seen recently the correction with Bitcoin as well. And time again, they keep losing their position because they can't hold on due to their emotions. So the same message applies in the strategy side. And as we can see here, one of the greatest traders in history, Jesse Lauriston Livermore, and it's all about patience. And he's saying here the market does not beat them. They actually beat themselves, because though they have brains, they cannot sit tight. This is the greatest challenge in any bull market, is sitting tight, being patient, riding it out. For the majority, this is incredibly difficult to do, and that's how markets work. But the few that can sit tight, the few that can be patient, the few that can take an overall bigger picture view, they're the ones who are going to succeed, and that's probably about 5 or 10%. And it's our job to make sure that we are the 5 or 10%. So whenever you see any corrections, please be mindful of those things that will help you to not get off the Bitcoin train over here. And the reason why I mention that is because recently a lot of people have been leaving the Bitcoin miners because we're having a much deeper correction with the miners than we are with Bitcoin. And just to give you a little bit of an insight into this, about attitude, about patience, about the sitting, about taking the overall bigger picture view, we can see clearly in the last few weeks with Marathon, which is a very good representative of the Bitcoin miners, just in the last 2 months, the price for the Bitcoin miners, represented by Marathon here, has gone down by between 40 and 50%. And this has happened time and time again since we bottomed out at the end of 2022. So you can see here, we fell around about 53% at this point, another 60% at this point, and another near 50% at this point. So since we bottomed out at the end of 2022, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 major corrections far in advance of what's happened with Bitcoin. But guess what? Each one has been followed by the following rises in the price. So the first one here led to a 156% rise. The second one at this point led to a 340% rise. The third one at this point led to 133%. And you can see that each of those rises went up to this trend line at this point. So by a process of logic and reasoning, where do you think we're going to go from where we are now after a 50% fall? You would think that it's going to go back up to this trend line one more time. So you can see how the miners are about to take off from where we are now. We could still go down a little bit more. There's still some room there. But as I'll show you with the indicators down here, that we may well be bottoming out. But just from where we are currently and to the next trend line, is another 180, 190%. So this to me looks like the logical place for the Bitcoin miners to go over the next few months. So while we expect Bitcoin to have a rapid rise, it seems logical to me anyway that the Bitcoin miners are going to follow suit. And if we look down here, we can see that each of these bottom points were bottomed out by the stochastic RSI before we had this rise to the upside. Similarly at this point, that was this point here and we had a big rise, and then this point here and we had a big rise to the upside. And guess what's happening now? The Bitcoin miners are primed to be going back to the upside. As per the charts here, it's not an opinion, we're just eliciting information from the charts. And here at Wisdom Bites we have a private member section which covers the Bitcoin miners as the main focal point to take us from where we are to the end of the bull market with Bitcoin. When what we're doing is tracking the long-term portfolio, which is up over 300% currently. And just like with Bitcoin, we want to capture the biggest move from where we are, i.e. the halving here, this white line. This is what happened with the Bitcoin miners, and we want to capture this big move over here. And that could be a 5x, 10x or 15x, whatever it is. We should just be very grateful to accept what the market will give us. But this is the intention, this is the objective, this is the target. If you want to join us with that potential, and of course nobody can guarantee that, I don't have a crystal ball. What we do have is a great potential over the next 6 to 12 months. If you want to join us, and for the price of a coffee per week, you can have access to 2 videos per week on the Wednesday and the Friday. We have a full library of videos that we've done with the Bitcoin miners since the private members section started last January in 2023. And we do a market update every single day and all the news, etc. of what's happening with the Bitcoin miners throughout the week. Okay, we'll leave it there. I hope you found value in the video. If you did, then please do remember to like and to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you've got any comments, questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Until the next time, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.